Hello and welcome back to No Bullshit. Today we're talking about another hit 90s show getting a revival season in 2018. Last time it was earlier this year when we went over the return of Roseanne, which not only turned out to be a big success and highly entertaining, it also featured the main titular character Roseanne being a Trump supporter. Now, come to find out by the end of the season, this was just a small side story for the first episode or two, but it was certainly nice to see, especially in this left-wing dominated climate we're in. In current year, liberals control the media, Hollywood, and most TV shows and movies, so seeing Roseanne come back with a pro-Trump angle in her new season was certainly welcomed. And most would say this is what helped her revival succeed so well. Conservatives and other Trump supporters flocked to the show, and Roseanne was quickly renewed for another season that was supposed to come out this fall. But we all know things changed a few months later. What happened after that was Roseanne was crucified in the media for a joke she made on Twitter, which turned into many people accusing her of being racist, which eventually led to her getting fired by ABC. And now, a few months after that, and it looks like another 90s show saw how well Roseanne's revival did, and now they're doing a new season of their own. And that brings us to today's topic. The longtime CBS sitcom Murphy Brown just had its revival season's premiere this week, and, well, it looks like in contrast to Roseanne, this revival is going full libtard. It starts off with Murphy in a nasty woman shirt. There's even a Women's March protest too, and also, there's a surprise cameo appearance by none other than Hillary Rodham Clinton. That's right, this liberal Murphy Brown revival is really trying to counter the conservative-leaning Roseanne one really bad, and it's turned into a bit of a mess too. And I'll say right out the gate, the episode's not terrible. I still admittedly laughed a bit, but they do sympathize with the left-wingers a little too much for my liking, and the Hillary appearance is certainly cringy as hell. So today, we're going to go over this episode a bit, talking some about the story, but more focusing on the political references and, of course, the Hillary Clinton cameo. But before we get to that, let's go ahead and start from the beginning. First of all, for those who don't know, Murphy Brown was a situational comedy show for CBS, which originally aired from 1988 to 1997. The story follows the actress Candice Bergen, who plays the title character, Murphy Brown, who is a famous investigative journalist and news anchor who covers high-profile social and political stories on her major network show called FYI. And all the while, Murphy deals with the quirky side characters in her supporting staff and family and friends. It's a pretty standard setup for a sitcom when you think about it, and it was admittedly well done for what it was. I was never the biggest fan of it back in the day or anything, but I certainly saw an episode or two here or there in reruns over the years, and it certainly had a big following and cultural impact as well. Now, that finally brings me to today's new Murphy Brown episode, the first one in this revival season, and it's called Fake News. Pretty fitting in this day and age, and as you'll soon see, the premise for this show turns out to be the perfect platform to discuss these modern political issues. Sure, the show leans left and it even frustrates many conservatives like myself, but they are doing things in a comedic, joking way, and it's not too preachy at all, besides the Clinton stuff. And although Murphy Brown certainly gets way more political than Roseanne did in its revival, it actually works out fine since the setup for this show plays into it, because they're reporters. Let me explain more. You see, like I said before, the Murphy Brown character is a journalist and news anchor, and at the beginning of this new episode, Murphy gets so fed up with the current controversial political climate that she decides to come out of retirement and return to hosting the TV news. The episode begins with news clips and a flashback montage to the US presidential election of 2016. Trump versus Hillary, of course. Then we cut to Murphy Brown, who is sleeping on her couch the night of the election. She sits up and we see she's wearing an interesting shirt that says Original Nasty Woman, which is a joke on the Nasty Woman shirts many girls started wearing at all those protests and the Women's March and stuff. And this meme originally came from Trump himself, because he called Hillary a nasty woman. And after that, Hillary's supporters first tried to shame Trump for saying it, and then they embraced the title for themselves in solidarity, as we see Murphy Brown is doing herself. And if this part seems a little dated now, well, you're kinda right. It's been almost 2 whole years since this election, but I guess Murphy Brown is playing catch up a bit here. Not that kind of catch up, but you know what I mean. And this is fine, sure. The show wasn't around 2 years ago after all, but also, it does make some of these jokes feel a little old and passé. Almost like the show and its writers are getting a little old and slow themselves too, but oh well, let's go ahead and move forward. Next, Murphy goes to her usual bar spot for a drink, seemingly coming out of a Women's March type protest that's going on outside. The bartender inside is a real peach too. I mean, she seems nice and all, but she's also got pink hair with a bull dyke haircut. Not a good look. Regardless, Murphy asks for a coffee, and shortly after, her 2 friends and former co-hosts join her for a chat. The guy co-host even comes in wearing one of those pink hats. Those pink little knitted hats all the leftists and women's marchers are wearing nowadays. But funny enough, the guy actually admits he's just trying to get a date at the protest. And that's probably the same reason a lot of guys attend these marches too, in real life. They're just trying to get laid. And this is also why male feminists always end up being the worst too, because they pretend to be in it for virtuous reasons, but really, they think this will get them chicks. Pretty deceptive and disingenuous. So it's no surprise these guys end up being big assholes. Next, fake news gets a mention here. And also Murphy Murphy complains about the supposed Muslim ban, even using that propaganda-influenced term as if it was an actual fact, which is funny because they're trying to portray Brown as this smart and great journalist, but she still claims that there were 3 different Muslim bans, even though they were really just travel bans that featured a number of dangerous Muslim-majority countries. And I guess it looks like the left-wing politics of the writers and the network are starting to show through here. The episode's not ruined yet, but it's definitely earning the reputation I thought it would get. It's a leftist playground, and this is also a direct reaction to the successful, conservative-leaning Roseanne revival, except Murphy Brown is the liberal left-wing version, and she's also not as funny or cool. And well, in light of this fake news and the supposed Muslim bans, Murphy decides it's time for her to get back on TV and start reporting again, thinking she can make a push to improve American journalism and politics, and dare I say, make America great again? A funny thing happens when Murphy goes to tell her son about this though, about her new show. Well, it turns out her son has a new show as well, and he even has the same time slot as his mom. So Murphy and her son will be going head to head on TV, which should be fun to watch. And what's also funny is Murphy's son has a show on what's called the Wolf Network. Murphy scoffs hard upon first hearing about this, saying the men there are conspiracy theorists and the women are dead in the eyes. So I think this show is trying to set up the Wolf Network as a sort of fictional Fox News or something, or it might even go so far as to be a parody of Alex Jones and InfoWars. It's too early to tell right here, but those are my guesses. And now that Murphy Brown is reviving her news show, which is happening during the revival of the actual Murphy Brown show, a revival show within a revival show, so to speak, and well, Murphy has her co-host on board already, but they need to get their original producer to join the project too. He's been staying at the Watergate Hotel, which reminds us that this whole thing is set in Washington, D.C., the U.S. Capitol, and home to the President, the White House, the Senate, House of Representatives, and Supreme Court. Murphy Brown, the show, and the character are based in the political capital of this country for a reason too. I mean, this is the kind of news they're covering after all, which makes for some interesting comedy to say the least, and a good location for the show. Brown's producer is reluctant to rejoin them though. He's been bummed and depressed since his last job broke him down. After the original Murphy Brown show ended, this producer ended up working on another, less intellectual show. He worked on The View, and he said handling the personalities and the infighting there was a real nightmare, which I'm sure is right. And hearing someone else bash The View for once is rather nice too. That show has really devolved into an SJW liberal hellhole, so seeing Murphy Brown goof on them as well is pretty nice. Finally get to the famous cameo we've all been waiting for. Hillary Clinton appears about halfway through this episode, and thankfully, the show did come up with a pretty interesting and funny way to squeeze her in. They bring Hillary on to interview for the position of Murphy Brown's secretary. That's right, and this is actually a recurring gag from other seasons of the show. Murphy has had many short-term secretaries over the years, all of which usually just appear for one episode and then they never come back, and it looks like Hillary is keeping up with this tradition. The scene is played a little differently than you might think though. When Murphy recognizes Hillary's appearance and name, Clinton responds that that's just a coincidence, and her name is spelled differently, with just one L. It's a little confusing how they do this, but basically, she's either the real Hillary and she's pretending not to be, or it is just a coincidence and it's weird and funny. Either way, comedy does ensue here. So let's go ahead and check out stuff and just laugh it off, but for Hillary, in this scene, it just doesn't work for me. Not only is Clinton humorless and stiff and creepy, it's also not actually that cool to joke about something shady you got away with, like how she did with deleting her emails. She probably should have been investigated and punished for this, but now she's just joking about it, which seems a little tasteless. It's like if O.J. Simpson joked around about killing his wife and that waiter. It would just be awkward and really not funny or cool. And not to mention, it's kind of flaunting that you got away with something. Hillary is almost bragging that she got away with deleting her emails, and that's super not cool. And quite frankly, I think this whole Murphy Brown appearance is dumb and poorly thought out too. Sure, it makes sense for a TV show to go for something like this and try and get attention with a big name guest, but I really don't get why Democrats and liberals are still remembering Hillary fondly at all. Hillary is a disgrace to the party and to the country, and every Democrat who wants to win and push their policies one day again, they should reconsider having Clinton involved in anything, including this TV show. Hillary Clinton is toxic and just makes things worse for everyone. And after 2 years since her loss, people should really be trying to forget Hillary ever happened and move on, especially if they ever want to win over the American people again, and if Democrats ever want to be taken seriously again. And I can't help but notice how similar Murphy Brown is to Hillary Clinton. They both look so similar. They're both old, shrewd, rotund white women with fake blonde hair too. And of course, they're both liberal shills who we can barely take seriously anymore. At least Murphy Brown is funny though, and she can still carry a sitcom pretty well. But right now, all Hillary Clinton can carry is that life alert necklace around her neck. And all she's good for is making us Republicans look good and better and like we're the more sane party. Hillary Clinton makes Republicans look good and respectable, and people want to vote for us over her. And that's why secretly, I'm happy Hillary is still hanging around here, making these kinds of appearances here or there. This is only going to help our right side. Every time Hillary is mentioned or shown, people are going to remember how she lost despite having the whole world supporting her, and even going so far as to have the media lying about the polls for her, and having Democrats cheating for her in the primaries. And despite all that bullshit, Hillary still still lost, because she's just terrible and unlikable and shrewd to boot. In the end, this was the only scene with Hillary stuff, but in my opinion, it was already too much. The rest of the episode continues with its topical and political themes though, even going so far as to have Murphy Brown get into a Twitter war with President Trump himself. This turns into a big disaster, of course, that almost ruins Brown's new talk show, the show within the show. Chaos totally ensues there, but it ends up actually being good for the ratings, ensuring a strong future for the new show within a show. All in all, not a totally bad episode, despite featuring one of the most detested Americans of all time. Sure, Murphy Brown has a big liberal tilt to it, but I still appreciate the politics and the gags. The main thing was, and I repeat, no one should be inviting Hillary Clinton to appear anywhere, especially Democrats, because she's just a dead mean who only makes them look hypocritical and worse. I'll admit though, I'm interested to see where this new Murphy Brown season goes, and I have to admit, I probably wouldn't have watched this episode if it weren't for the Hillary stuff too, to begin with. It makes sense for Murphy Brown to try and follow in Roseanne's footsteps here too, but alas, I doubt this show has what it takes to match up with Rosie, who's much more hilarious and cool and fun to watch. What do you guys think? Was Hillary Clinton's appearance as cringy as you thought? Will Murphy Brown continue to bash Trump and conservatives? And what do you think about this recent trend of reviving these older shows? Comment your thoughts on everything below, and thanks for watching No Bullshit. See y'all next time.